All right, y'all. Why don't we get started? Um, Welcome again to another Fundraising Friday. This week we're going to be going over how to turn folks from members of your base to supporters of your organization. Here is an overview of our whole staff at Progressive Multiplier. I'll be running the show solo today, but as you know, my colleagues, especially Polly and Valeria, often show up to these, but please feel free to reach out to any of us if you need anything at all. A little bit of a refresher on who we are as Progressive Multiplier Fund. Um, we help organizations build a progressive movement of by and for everyday people. We do this by organizing and leveraging funding to create on-ramps for progressive organizations to start, strengthen, or scale individual giving and earn revenue programs. Through both an online community of practice, of which y'all are a part of, and our grant making and support program, we build a progressive sector's revenue generation knowledge and skills so that it can amplify a people-powered movement. Our three focus areas of grant making are, again, achieving justice, realizing democracy, and restoring the environment. Our focus in this work is to grow the revenue generation capacity of orgs that spend most of their resource doing work that affects government, industries, and courts that make widespread change. And we feel that through enabling these organizations to maximize their fundraising potential, giving them the opportunity to resource their movements as much as possible, we can build sustained progressive power. Uh, Again, a shout out to our partners at Resilience Initiative for helping to throw this. Um, Please introduce yourself in the chat with your name, org, and role. This session is recorded and, as always, is available on our private YouTube channel. I will share the link a little bit later. So feel free to check out this session again. If you missed one of the previous ones, to look at those as well, or you can share them with other folks. Um, Again, we have these fundraising Friday sessions, which have the two tracks, the 101 track, which is building on our fundraising fundamentals, and 201, which is looking at current trends and next level topics that you all have decided. We also pair that with fundraising coaching, so up to 5 hours of individual coaching, consulting, and deliverable prep. There are lists right there of some of the former projects that we've worked on in the past. And I really suggest that you take advantage of this opportunity to get some fundraising support around anything that you've heard in any of our presentations, anything going on internally that you want to do with your organization. Slots are filling up fast, so I'll share the sign up form again, but you can reach out directly to myself or to Michelle Mengel at Resilience Initiative to get signed up as well. And again, if you need to revisit any of the past sessions or you want to rewatch this one, share it with colleagues, et cetera, you can check it out on the private YouTube channel. So a little bit about what we are going to cover today in this base moving to supporter training. We're going to cover basis versus supporter. What does each of those mean? How do you define your base? How do you define your supporters? What are the similarities? What are the differences? In some organizations, they may be very similar, but also how do you move people through that journey and get them to be a supporter? We're going to talk about creating a donor journey. So once people are in your base, how you move them through to become a supporter, and some strategies and tools that you can use to help make that process more efficient, as well as saving some space for some Q&A from you all. Great. So first, we're going to start out with understanding the differences between non-monetary and monetary supporters. So we're going to start by defining what our base is. So our base is any individual or groups of individuals who are supporting our mission, values, and goals in a number of ways. Here it says it's considered non-monetary support. I also like to think of our supporters who support us financially as members of our base. So it's almost as if all your supporters are a member of your base, but not all of your base are your supporters, right? Anyone who supports your organization in any form or capacity is a member of your base, right? So that could be volunteers, that could be organizers, that could be activists, community members, leaders, subscribers to your newsletter, social media followers, people who show up at rallies, people who show up at other events, allied organizations. All of these folks are members of your base because they have been touched by your work and they have made the intentional decision to take action with you in some form or capacity. And so oftentimes we talk about base building organizations and what that means. That in a definition sense is really referring to community members coming together to advocate for some form of change in their community, and community being a loose term. So that could be like your actual community, locally or city-based. It could be state, it could be national, it could be international. But what this model does is it organizes people around a common issue and uses their people power that creates with the goal of creating a critical mass to enact some form of change, right? So oftentimes you see organizations that have a membership model that are focused on organizing is referred to as base building or power building organizations, and that's what that refers to. There's a slight difference between that and a supporter. So the supporter grouping is really referencing folks who are donors of your organization. So what this means is anyone who is giving a monetary or in-kind donation to your organization. More often than not, we're talking about folks who are donating actual dollars to your organization, and it could even be just $1. That makes them a supporter, right? One distinction that I will note is for smaller organizations, for maybe more grassroots organizations, there are forms of giving that would make you a supporter that don't necessarily have to be monetized, right? So volunteering, for instance, right? Some of your biggest supporters may be folks who spend their time, who work on programming with you, who donate hours or capacity, right? That is a form of in-kind donation that we often don't think about when it comes to supporter. So even though like this is a little bit more black and white, so we can make that distinction in the real world, it's really up to your organization how you define who's in your base and who's in your supporter groupings. So just in general, we have a small group today, so we can dive a little bit deeper. Have any of your organizations really tried to measure who's in your base? I know a lot of organizations think about like who's their donors and can easily track that. But do any of your organizations actually track your base numbers?
So I work at ACN and we're a membership org. So we definitely keep up with our numbers that way, like our base that way. We're trying to figure out folks who are on our list but aren't donors type of thing and aren't members, like how we want to like interact with them and maybe turn them into donors or what kind of supporter they want to be.
Fabulous. Yeah, so that's sometimes a tricky distinction, right? So like if you have a membership program and that's very well defined, especially by paying dues, right? You can have that grouping of folks who are part of your base, and then you have the folks who are just simply donors, right? Who maybe just give 10, 20, $50, but aren't really taking part in the activities of the organization, right? That's a grouping in your base. But then again, you have this larger group, this more amorphous group who are semi-involved in your organization who don't fit neatly into either of those boxes. And so, yeah, part of that, part of the progress for organizations like yours is to figure out what is a direct pipeline that you can get those folks either to be a member or to be a donor, while the relationship is still warm, right? You want to be able to steer folks to either one of those pathways as quickly as possible, just so that while the relationship is warm and they're at their most attentive to your organization, you can capitalize on that and figure out what their interests are and how they wish to be a part of your organization. Thanks for sharing, Michelle. Chloe, Natalie, do y'all have membership programs or are tracking base numbers in any way?
Hi, yeah. So my role is digital organizing. So for example, we do have folks who are subscribed to our news e-letter. So yeah, so I keep more like track of like those digital types of member.
Got
Oh,
it.
and social media.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Yeah. As we went over before, that's a great way of tracking impact. Especially I think if your work tangentially is around young people, being able to track impact on social media, follower count, newsletter count is a great way of showing impact, especially under a younger demographic. Great.
Yeah, similar. My role is a social media person. So I've seen numbers as far as social media support, but we also have a digital newsletter. Um, I work for REAP, Religious Exemption Accountability Project.
Great.
And so we also have that digital subscriber base.
Got it. Great. So now that we've like really defined what the differences between your base and your supporters are, let's talk about the journey to like get to that point. So the donor journey is talking about essentially a framework, a series of stages that every donor goes through, not always in a straight line order, but from the point that they hear your organization's name or they see your organization, have some awareness about who you are as an organization to the point to giving actual money, time, effort, whatever the case is, whatever your action step that you want for folks to do, how you go through that, right? So there's 5 stages: awareness, consideration, conversion, retention, and advocacy. And so we'll go through all of those stages, what they mean, and what certain triggers are to get people to move through this journey. And I want you to be thinking about how you engage with your base now, how you engage with your donors now, and if there are things that you can incorporate from this to make your process a little bit more efficient or effective. So as we said before, there are 5 steps. And again, it doesn't always go in this order or at the same pace, or just like from step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Like sometimes you go forward, you might go backwards a little bit, and then keep going forwards. But the first thing is awareness. So people finding out and learning about your nonprofit, right? Oftentimes, especially community organizing, your base building is as effective as your outreach, right? People need to know who you are, what you're doing, and what you stand for them to make a decision about aligning themselves with you, right? So the questions you're asking about this phase of the donor journey is, how do people normally hear about your organization and how can you increase that awareness, right? Are you a word of mouth type of organization where it's more relational building, where maybe folks who are already involved in your organization introduce your org to some of their friends, their colleagues, their community members? Do you do advertising at all through social media? maybe through traditional media? Are you a very visible public action organization? Are you holding rallies? Do you have merch that people look at that they can say, oh, that is XYZ group again doing this action. I've seen their logo before, or I recognize that hoodie. I've seen people wearing that t-shirt before, right? So a lot of this is about branding and how people find out about your organization. The second stage is consideration. So now that I know who you are, how do I learn what you are? What are you about? Why are you doing the work that you're doing? What is your organizational story? What's your mission and vision? What's the change that you want to create in the world? And do I want to be a part of that, right? So what your organization should be thinking about, if maybe you're getting stuck at the consideration phase, like maybe you have really great brand awareness, people know who you are, but you're not getting really high return numbers as far as folks joining what you would call your base or becoming supporters, right? So what you would want to think about is, how easy is it for folks to understand our work? Who are we? Is our mission very clear? Is it easy to pick up and engage with? Is it something that is popular already, or something that requires a little bit more political education around for folks to understand why we're doing the work that we're doing, right? These are all things that affect the consideration rate of potential base members or potential donors. And then this is kind of the money like place, right? The conversion. So this is when I've heard about your org. Maybe I came to a meeting, or I got a one-pager, you gave me a QR code to your website. I read about it. I was like, oh, this organization is pretty dope. I would love to support their work, or I would love to get more involved in some case, right? And now it's for you as the organization to make that ask of me. Hey, come to this rally. Hey, be a part of our membership program, be a donor, whatever the case is, right? Making that direct ask to an individual, right? And so the things that you want to think about here are, how are you making your ask? When are you making your ask? Are your asks appropriate to the folks that you're asking from? Whether that is a commitment, a gift size, et cetera, et cetera. And how do you influence that decision of folks to say yes to engaging with your organization, right? So that's step 3. Normally, a lot of organizations stop here, and this is where they falter, right? This is built as an arrow, but I want you to think of the last 3 steps as a cycle. Because what you want to do ultimately is to retain your donors. And so the next step, retention, is about how do you keep people engaged for the long term? You've done all this work branding yourself to me, writing copy and creating language that you can share so I know who you are, going through the effort of making the ask to me so that I can be a donor, right? Why do all of that work just to lose me in a year and then have to find somebody else to get my $20, right? You want to keep me engaged, keep me there for the long term. So what is your retention program that keeps folks knowing what's going on, keep them considering and continuing to convert into your organization? As fundraisers, as organizers, we often feel compelled that there is only so much that we can do with our work. And while that is true, cannot force anyone to give. You cannot force anyone to be a member. You can give them really good reasons to, though, right? And it's like being, you're in a relationship with this person. So it's like, you can't just date the person and then drop the ball, right? You got to keep working with them, keep dating them, essentially over and over and over. So you want to build this program that helps support the work that you've already done and help keep them excited about what's coming ahead for you and your organization. And then finally, the advocacy stage, right? So now you got me in, I've donated 3 years in a row. I show up to your fundraising event. I even got a membership. I came to a couple rallies. I feel like I'm part of your organization, right? I bought a hoodie. I wear the hoodie. You know, what's next for me? What's next is for me to share this organization that I love with my network, right? So now I am an extension of your organization itself, and I'm an advocate, right? So what you want for folks like me, once I've gone through this stage and I've gone through retention a couple of times, and I'm really like a part of the organization, now you would want me to feel so compelled or teach me and train me. How do I talk to my friends and tell them, hey, I've been volunteering with this really dope organization. I feel like it aligns with what you got going on. I would love for you to come by and check out our rally next week. Or we're doing this program, feeding folks down at the YMCA. Come check us out, right? Anything like that. So you would want your donors, your supporters to feel empowered and compelled to share the story of your organization with others the same way that it was shared with you, right? So eventually folks would either do these steps of the donor journey themselves and manage that for external donors, or be able to funnel folks to you to be able to continue this cycle with new people. Does that make sense? Any questions around the journey before we move forward? No, we're good. All right, great. So one tool that you can do that makes this a lot less theoretical and might be more real is to do a mapping, right? So if you had all the time and capacity in the world, you could do this with like every individual to map out where they are. Um, this is the real world. We normally don't have that much time. So maybe this is something that you would do with a group, with a cohort, right? But being able to track what stage folks are in your engagement plan, right? Some of this, like it says here, can be as simple as just an automated acknowledgement letter when a donation is made, and that kicks off the conversion into the retention stage, right? Or you can have a lot more complex strategy, especially if you're an organizing organization and you're doing power building, to be able to um, give people calls to action, give people ways to donate and how they interact with all of those. But you want to create a process, a regular process that kind of designs, outlines, and tracks their interventions and how they engage with your organization, because that's the way that you're going to be able to tell where you're actually getting caught up in the conversion process, right? So if folks are grabbing all the information thinking you're dope, but they're not donating, there is a reason for that. There's some form of disconnect. So in that ask phase, you can then pinpoint there, okay, where's things falling apart for us? Why are we not getting the money that we expect to get? Or if you have, like I said before, great brand recognition, but folks are not really wanting to take a deep dive and learn more about your org, then that in the consideration phase is where you're falling apart, right? Or maybe you have a ton of one-time donors, but your retention rate is garbage. Like people fall off a cliff year after year, and you have to spend all this energy trying to find new and new donors. So what that means is your retention strategy is poor. So let's focus on that and figure out how we can keep more donors and raise that retention rate, right? So with your organizations, what are some activities that maybe y'all do in any of the stages that are outlined that you feel like you do a really good job at? Like what is your org in this donor journey like really successful at?
Actually, I had a question for you. Is this similar to like what you would call like a donor engagement ladder, which is like, how you're moving them up and things like that. Not just like in terms of them giving more and upgrading their donation, but also just like engagement.
100%. There are a bunch of different like forms for it. This one is just a little bit more framed around like people building and power building organizations, because there are often more ways for folks to engage with organizations like that, rather than ones where like they really just only have donations as a form of engaging with the organization. So they don't really do much base building. But yes, very similar.
Got it. Thank you. Can you repeat the question again? I'm sorry. I had that question on my mind, so I forgot.
No worries. Yeah, I was just saying, maybe if you can give some examples of some of the work that you feel like your organization does really well in this donor journey, whether it's branding yourself and putting yourself out there, sharing a lot of information, being really successful or comfortable with making asks, retaining a lot of donors, anything like that, and like what the strategy behind it is for your org.
So in thinking about that, what comes to mind is like we're just really good at seeing fundraising from like more of an abundance perspective and not scarcity mindset. And so we are like the way we see or frame like fundraising is like our job is to ask people. Whether they say yes or no is up to them, but our responsibility is to ask. And I think that makes us really strong fundraisers because we're just not afraid to make the ask. And even if they say no, there are other ways to keep people engaged too. And I think that's when we try to like fold them into the org in other ways.
That's great. So what that means in the donor journey mapping is, right, you've got folks who've considered you, and when you're trying to cultivate that ask, normally that's where a lot of organizations freeze up, but you have a culture of being comfortable with making that ask, and that allows you to A, raise more money because you're getting more asks out there, but B, also keep folks engaged in your base, in different ways, right? So even if it might be a no right now, maybe through different forms of engagement, they really learn to love your organization and will become a donor in the future, right? And so that's what I meant by sometimes the donor journey isn't the same, or isn't a straight line, right? So going back to this chart, the conversion phase is what's kicked off with the ask, right? So sometimes you get to the conversion phase, and it doesn't work, and you go back to consideration, right? But by keeping folks engaged, you're still giving them more information, having them build more of an affinity for your organization. So that doesn't mean that in the future they won't jump forward into the conversion phase. And then from there, it actually might be easier to retain them because they have a working relationship with your organization. It isn't just a direct gift off of, minimal engagement. So that's a great example. Anyone else? Okay, we can keep going. So why is this important at all? Oftentimes, like these deeper level thought processes around converting folks, retaining folks, etc., feels like auxiliary work. If we could do that, if I had more time, if I had more people, obviously I would, but like I don't right now. So why would I care? Why would I invest my limited time and resources into this, right? Well, first off, for systems and infrastructure, you will fail to the level of your systems. That is a fact, proven over time. It doesn't matter how amazing the folks in your organization are. we are unfortunately humans, and so we burn out, we run out of time, we don't stay all the time, right? So you can have fabulous organizers on your team or the most kick-ass fundraisers on your team, whether through retirement, burnout, getting a different job, whatever the case may be, they're going to leave your organization at some point, right? So if you can't systematize ways of replicating their greatness, all of that good stuff is going to leave with your organization when they leave. So establishing some form of order of operations for your strategy will allow people to pick up that work despite changes in the actual personnel within your organization. Another thing that is really effective about thinking through a donor journey is that it's donor focused. It's not just focused on the dollars, which as fundraisers, there's an inherent push for us to be focused on the dollars. But the dollars will come with this strategy. But what this does is it really thinks about making your relationship with the folks who engage with your organization mutually beneficial. And what that means is higher happiness among your donors, higher donor retention rate, and increased affinity for your organization. They're going to remain a partner to you and your organization because you've actually done the work of getting to know them, of inviting them to things, of maybe seeing their face around, right? So they will care more about your organization rather than someone that they gave to once and that only hits them up when it's Giving Tuesday, and it feels like they're just soliciting them for money. This brings people into the fold and helps them feel strongly about your organization. It also helps you understand donor motivations, needs, and barriers more. So you're going to be a better fundraiser, especially focused on your organization's demographic base of who you normally fundraise from. Having this process will help you save a lot of time in figuring out maybe why a certain donation style isn't working the way that you thought it would for your organization. Because now, as we said before, you're able to pinpoint at which stage things are breaking down, and you can look at those actual triggers and tweak maybe little parts of it rather than looking at a program that's not successful and thinking all of it isn't successful and then you have to tear everything down and rebuild. This allows you to work actually more efficiently by setting up your tracking systems in the first place. Any questions on that part before we get into how we want to create a donor journey? No? Okay. So let's talk about how we're going to build this plan and create essentially a funnel for our supporters to turn into donors. So the first thing that we want to do is to segment our donors. You can segment donors across a number of different ways. So most common ones are through the donation size, right? So oftentimes you'll see we have it there at the bottom. You have your grassroots donors, which are lower level donors, lower level dollar donors, your mid-level donors, and then your major donors, right? And each one of those would get different styles of communication sent to them. So personalized communication, the stewardship would be tailored around their needs, but they're oftentimes you get back increased donations because you have stronger engagement from it, right? But there are different ways that you can also segment your donor base. Sex, location, age, education level, all of these are different things that for different reasons you may want to communicate with your donor base differently, right? So for instance, if you are an organization that has a bunch of young people in it, but also maybe a lot of adults, you can have specific fundraising events that are catered more towards young people and what they would want, and platforms for them that you would solicit them from. And then different fundraising campaigns that would be maybe for like an older demographic. And that would be a lot more successful than sending everything to everyone, right? So for instance, you wouldn't really want to run a TikTok fundraising campaign with a bunch of older folks, because they don't really use the platform the same way or at the same frequency as like a younger Gen Z, millennial, et cetera, et cetera. On the reverse side, there are things like bequeath programs where folks write you into their will. You wouldn't run that for an organization full of young people, because they have no idea about writing a will yet. That's not something that's really in their purview. So it's not that either a TikTok campaign or a bequeath campaign aren't successful fundraising campaigns. They just might not be the right fit for your uh, donor base, or for all of your donor base. So figuring out through segmentation how you want to cultivate gifts and cultivate a relationship with those donors, and how you communicate with them, even down to like voice, is something that can be incredibly helpful. Another part of this is thinking through prospective donor research. Oftentimes, like, donor research is very much relegated to institutional donors. We feel comfortable researching foundations, figuring out what they are interested in funding, trying to figure out who do we know that knows someone that works there, if they could make an introduction, and then pitching them our work, either through a call or LOI, proposal, etc., and hoping that they give us a gift, right? It's a tried and true method, but that also works with individuals as well. It's the same thing. It may not be as nuanced, but if we're trying to find folks within our community who would potentially support a piece of work, we should be doing the same thing. Ask your staff, ask your board, who are some people that you know in the community. This is especially around like higher net worth individuals to be donors, but screening and searching for folks who can be involved with your work. We're going to share these slides after we're done, but there is a donor profile template in there that really helps map all of this out. And as always, it's always easier and best if folks can introduce you to an organization or to a donor, rather than just a cold call. Relational fundraising is still incredibly important, and people trust folks that are vetted by the people that they know and that they trust. So relying on that mutual connection is always a good thing. Right. So donor conversion, which is the process of moving individuals or orgs that have shown an interest in your organization to actual donors. So now we've surveyed the scene, figured out who we want to prospect, and now we're trying to convert them. We're trying to make that ask. We're trying to get them to give to our organization in some form or capacity. Or if they've already given to our organization, we want them to give again, be a regular donor, be a recurring donor. Maybe they gave in the last year, but haven't this year. We want them to double back. Maybe they gave a couple years ago, but they haven't given recently. We want to get them back, right? So donor conversion is not just absolutely new folks. It can be folks who have had a relationship with your organization that just don't right now. Right. So a lot of this is thought through the process of moves management. So what we want to do there is basically recreate a smaller, succinct version of what we're doing in the larger donor journey, just for the conversion, right? So this would be where you would see organizations, maybe you're running a email campaign, right? Or a social media campaign, or you're hosting a gala or some form of fundraising event. That's actual moves management. So doing the outreach to them, getting them excited, soliciting the gift, all the steps in that will fall into your moves management plan, which is all a part of donor conversion. So it's just like a more succinct subset of action items that you can take to move people along this process. Right. So different ways that we can do this. Consistent email communication to your segmented list and engaging social media content. Again, no one likes when people hit them up only for money, right? Whether that's on a personal level with a family member or a friend, or it's on an organizational level with folks that you donate to. If you only hit people up when you want something from them, it's going to turn them off. So ensure that you are communicating with folks throughout the year. Share stories, share your impact as an organization, let people know what their previous investment has gone to, what change you're making in the world, what progress you're making. You know, that those are all steps that will lead up to a more successful ask rate when it's time for you to make your ask. Think through your metrics and shift your content according to what's working. And be open to tweaking your content. What worked in the past may not necessarily be working now. 10 years ago, your social media work would be relying on just a couple Facebook posts, right? In a number of years, not really that long, we've seen, as you all know, social media become an incredible way to fundraise, and is ever changing with new platforms that have different ways of sharing information, and that different forms of how you share information are different on different platforms, right? So we need to tweak what we do to keep up with the times. So thinking through our email open rates, our opt-ins, our web engagement, social media engagement, text messaging, whatever we're doing to reach out to folks, thinking through, we have to find out what standard looks like. Oftentimes just doing some quick Google searches on what the average open rate for emails or for social media engagement or for text message solicitations looks like, right? And then analyze our numbers. Are we above average, below average? And are there things that we can explain this by? What's working well, what's not working well, and how do we get to where we want to be with this, right? Also make donating easy. You don't know how many organizations do not have a visible, big, bright donate page or donate button on every page of their website. Give various giving options. You know, it says here, sometimes avoid Cash App and Zelle. If you're a smaller organization and you're working hand to hand with people, it's okay to use that. The more difficult thing and reason for this is because ultimately what we want is this donor's information to be able to solicit them again, right? So we always want to funnel people into a platform where we're going to get a name, we're going to get a phone number, we're going to get an email address, we're going to get some way of hitting them back up again, because we want this to be more than one-time donations, right? But make donating easy. You know, you see it when you go shopping now. It's not just put your card in. They got Afterpay, they got Klarna, they got everything for you to give your money, right? You should be the same way. Have as many different ways as possible for folks to be able to engage with their organization and make donating easy. And in-person events. Obviously, we are experiencing another mini COVID surge right now. But if you can have safe in-person events, have safe in-person events. It's a great way for engaging. As much as like Zoom has changed the world and the way that we're able to organize, I am 100% sure this training would be a lot more engaging if I could see y'all faces in person, right? So there are certain things that you just can't replicate over the internet or through text or even through visuals, right? So if you can have in-person events, definitely advocate for that. They're a great way to get folks excited about your work. Any questions about that before we keep going? Okay. So let's talk about implementation now, what you can do to create one of these for yourself. First things we want to think through is our comm strategy. Oftentimes in organizations, communications and development or communications and fundraising are two separate teams, oftentimes with differing goals, right? So we want to raise money. Comms maybe wants to tell stories about our organization and build engagement. Very highly related and highly dependent on each other. But because oftentimes they're split, there isn't a synergy between the two communications, right? So it's the same donor, right? It's me. I've donated to your organization, Chloe, right? And your comms department is emailing me newsletters about your work or about current events. And I'm getting emails as well from your fundraising department. It's Giving Tuesday. I've gotten 7 emails from you from the two departments. I'm overwhelmed and I'm like, enough, right? Stop emailing me, right? That is why folks like get tuned out or get turned off from your organization's communications, is because there's no overarching strategy there, right? So you want to link up your donation emails and your donor communications into the communications calendar so that folks aren't getting overloaded or bombarded, right? So we want folks to get the information that we need from both sides because they're equally important, under one cohesive voice too. Make sure the language is the same. Think about how you describe your work on the comm side. It should be the same as how you describe your work on the fundraising side. So it doesn't sound like two different people describing one organization. You want to have one voice, right? One band, one sound. That's what we're going for. Standardize your event follow-up plans, or if you're doing an email campaign, fundraiser, same thing. Thank you emails no more than 24 hours after the event or gift. An update if you're doing a campaign after the final dollars are raised. Even after that, you can do an update of this is how your money was spent. This is what it went towards. Keeps folks engaged, feeling like they did a good job, like what they invested into your organization was worthwhile, right? Use multiple channels to reach donors. And again, this is where segmenting comes in important, right? Social media, text, phone calls, direct mail. You can do donor surveys, educational content and messaging, all different ways of talking to your donors, right? You may not want to send a message on all of these platforms one time, right? Or making sure that everyone, you definitely want widespread reach, but you may not want a person to feel overwhelmed, like in the example before, where I'm getting an email from your comms department, an email from your fundraising team. I go on IG and you're asking for money there. I get a text message from you. 2 days later, your director of development's calling me. Like, I'm gonna feel flustered, right? As a donor. That's why we want to map out these engagements so we can see in a realistic sense how many times like we are doing a touch with an individual during heavy fundraising season, like we're heading into. There are certain times where it makes sense to do multiple touches a day. On Giving Tuesday, at the end of the year, those last 2-3 days, heading into December 31st, doing a couple of emails or social media pushes, that's fine. But we don't want to blitz people completely from October to December. We're going to turn people off, right? So that's why we have to get an overarching strategy here. Right. So thinking through renewals or upgrade strategies. So this is for folks who are lapsed donors who gave once in the past but haven't given yet or didn't give recently, or folks who have given in the past, but we feel like they could give more, or they've been at the same given level for 2, 3, 4 years, and we need to re-ask them, and not just take that as a given that that's all that they can give, right? How do we know who these people are? We have to have data available to us to be able to track this information, right? We're not going to know who our lapsed donors are, who our renewals are, if I can't see that information. So we need to invest in some sort of CRM, client relationship management system, or a well-documented Excel sheet, however you track your data. But we need to know their giving history, and if possible, attaching their engagement history too. There are going to be some folks who like donate and they don't really want to communicate with you as an organization, and you should note that, so that folks don't bother them. They're going to be like, hey, I'm going to give X amount every year, don't email me, don't solicit me, and that's fine. Carry that information so you know not to bother them. There are going to be some other folks who maybe read everything and you can see that they have high email open rate, they're engaged with the work, and really like what you're doing as an organization, but haven't really committed to giving a big gift, or haven't, grown their gift in a number of years. Those are perfect people to be like, hey, would you consider upping your gift from 10 to 20 bucks? This is what it would do for the organization, right? And because of their email text open rate, whatever the case is, the conversations that you've been having, they are really interested in your programming, right? So then when you make that ask, you can frame it around the programming because it's more likely to entice them. All of this information should be talking to each other, right? And again, personalized communication, segmented list, refer to your giving history. You're not going to want to do a flat ask for everyone give $20, right? There might be folks who can only give $5, and that $20 is going to be like, well, I can't make that commitment right now, so I'm not going to give it all. Or there might be folks who could give 100, could give 200, but you solicited them for 20, right? So, well, that's what you need, so I'll do 20. You want to be able to figure out what the right ask for everyone is, and make those asks. Another form of doing outreach is some form of annual report, impact report, showing your work to your donors. It's a really great way of restarting a conversation with donors, in a very non-aggressive way. Here's what the money that you gave us in the past has allowed us to do. Would love a chance to talk deeper about our work, share something about our numbers. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. Super low touch, but it can be a great way to open up the door. Here we have some examples of some journey mapping tools that you can use. Again, these slides are going to be shared with you and the recording, so you don't have to start this from scratch. Also some CRM systems that are very popular, Salesforce, Blackbaud's Razor's Edge, and Every Action are all tools that are pretty much industry standard, and you can use to help build that database if you don't have something a lot more robust. And again, testing is of the utmost importance. The reason why we're setting all this stuff up this way is so that we can figure out how best to communicate with our donor base, right? Everyone who is in this training is going to operate differently because their donor bases are different, based on demographics, based on income level, based on age, location, all these different things. So thinking through where we can start, and how we can best analyze the data that we have and create a manageable plan based on our capacity, right? What we shared today can get really intensive. And so I don't want folks to feel intimidated by the fact that if you can't do all of this right away, it doesn't make sense to do any of it. That's not true. Again, I always tell folks, start with one thing. Whatever's the lowest effort thing for you to do to incorporate from this training today into your fundraising program, even if it's just maybe like taking an overarching look and mapping things out. How do we do these steps, right? That is one step on the journey, and then do another one, and then another one, and then eventually it'll snowball. And then before you know it, you'll have a fully fledged donor tracking base building model that you can refer to. But don't burn yourself out about having everything together all at once. Right. Great. And just wanted to leave some space for us to ask questions. I know that you all said before that you have membership programs or do some digital fundraising. So very happy to spend some time talking about your programs, things that you've seen, things that you need help with, and how best we can support.
Thanks so much. You give me a lot to think about. And for some reason, like the stuff that you were talking about was giving me a lot of brainstorming ideas for like the donor engagement piece. So I was furiously writing those ideas down before I lost them.
No worries. Like I said, we'll definitely share the slide. And then let me get those links to y'all. I'll put them in the chat here. This is to the private YouTube page. So this will be uploaded. So we can always refer back to it as well. And this should be the sign up page for the one-on-one fundraising support. Michelle, what are some of the ideas that you had? Maybe we can spend some time here working through them.
Yeah, so like one of the things that we've been talking about is like they say that you should be thanking a donor 7 different ways. But also just like I think part of that is just like you just have to engage your donor, right? So I was like, one of the things we talked about is doing like a book club, right? Like seeing if people want to do a book club at some point. We also talked about maybe I was just thinking about Zoom happy hours, like doing trivia nights or like maybe doing pop culture nights, or something like that. We also talked, since we do a lot around abortion, we were talking maybe doing like some kind of like listening hour or something where people can get an update around like what's going on politically and advocacy related to abortion. People can ask questions and just kind of stay more informed. Because staying up to date on, political and advocacy work is a lot. And so kind of like giving people kind of like a more streamlined way of getting updates. Yeah, those were kind of some of the things that popped in my head when you were kind of talking about the engagement piece.
Yeah, for sure. And again, it depends on who your donor base or who your base in general are, and different ways of doing that. Because I know folks who have done things like book club, great idea. I know folks who've done like happy hour things where people come and then they share a little bit about the work of the organization, and it's actually a fundraising event in and of itself, while also being like a place for folks to meet each other, build ideas, build community as well. So I think all of those are really fabulous ideas. It just depends on who your donor base is and how best they want to engage with your org and the work. And oftentimes even just asking folks who maybe are your bread and butter supporters right now, what they would like to see or ideas that they have will go a long way in figuring out what you all should do.
Yeah, so we increased our capacity. We're now 4 people on the development team, which is exciting because now we can actually like bring these ideas to fruition. So something else we've been talking about a lot is doing a donor survey to better segment our donors to and engage them in different ways based on that segmentation. So we're really looking forward to doing that next year.
Yeah. Donor surveys are a great way of getting engagement. And it also helps you like follow up with your donors, and for people to really think deeply about how they engage with your organization as well, and they feel really connected to your work, like, oh wow, they're listening to me and framing things around what I think, right? I really enjoy working with this organization.
Do you have any tips or like tricks related to converting like social media engagement to like a donor base? Like my organization, we've had a lot of success in growing our social media following in the last few months, um, and people like rallying people around the cause,
Mhm.
but not quite sure how like to convert that into like messaging around donors. So I don't know if there's any like advice to that.
Yeah, I think it's hard sometimes, right? Because social media is a great way of sharing information about your organization. But I've seen a lot of orgs don't make direct asks on social media or don't make asks regularly. So I would say increasing the direct asks that you make. If there are folks that you see who like engage with your posts on a very regular basis, like you see the same ats every time, sending a DM and reaching out in an individual way is also a way of engaging with folks through socials. Social media is also a great way to do peer-to-peer fundraising, right? So not only just you fundraising for yourself, but if folks, you know, I've seen and worked with orgs that do like birthday fundraisers. So instead of me asking for a gift for my birthday, it would be like raise the money you were going to spend on a gift, put it towards this foundation, right, or this nonprofit, and I would post the link to it on my social media, right? So that's something that you could easily work into, you know, your work, and also just sharing. If people do fundraisers for you, retweeting their stuff, sharing the posts across your social networks as well, I think is a great way for folks to get engaged.
Cool, thanks.
Mm-hmm. Natalie, any questions?
One, but kind of like it's not super off topic, but it is kind of basic. So we were like a comms team of one, and now we're two. So I think we're still building even those like fun foundational, like very basic like practices and like tools specifically. So my question is more related to tools. Back when you were talking about communications and like segmenting um like different, like whether it be the newsletter, posts, calls, text, and so we don't really have a system, like a calendar system or calendar tool. And I was interested to know what you or other folks used. Like, what was the tool in terms of like calendaring? Is it just like Google Calendar? I know there's stuff out there, but we're wanting to start to like, yeah, try out what would fit for us.
Mm-hmm. That is a great question. What I would say, the most effective tools are the tools that people are going to use, right?
Yeah.
So you can incorporate that into whatever you use right now, to manage your day-to-day that people look at will be the best way. Like I know folks who have done full Asana builds or Monday.com. I don't know if you're familiar with that tool.
Mhm.
Yeah, project management tools that have calendaring built in. I know folks who do that. I know folks who just do a Google Calendar, like make a group that is like communications or development and put the deadlines in like the actual calendar so it shows up on people's work calendar because they'll actually look at that, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it can be as complex or as simple as you'd like. I think the most important thing is that it's going to get in front of people's faces, and they're going to like actually use the information that's being shared with them.
Cool. Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you for the presentation.
Yeah, no
Super
worries.
cool.
Great. Any other questions? If not, thank you again for your time on Friday. I hope y'all have a great weekend, and we'll see you in a couple weeks for the next one.
Thank you. Likewise, everyone.
All right.
Bye. Appreciate it.